What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. It is so incredibly good to be back here doing the YouTube video. I certainly miss you guys. I am so grateful for Perry, Rachel, Janelle, Dan, Gage, and Alex for filling in over the course of the past 4 days, giving me an opportunity to go to Minnesota, watch the Viking game in Minneapolis, as well as recharge the batteries a little bit, spend some time with friends. It was great to do so. Thank you so much for joining them and giving them an opportunity to kind of fill in while I was out. And of course, they all do such a tremendous job. So thank you all, and thank you to them for filling in. As I mentioned, obviously had an opportunity to go to the game in Minneapolis, see US Bank Stadium. Couple quick takeaways. One, I will never take the concourses in Lambeau Field for granted again. There is so much space in the Lambeau Field concourses that if you need to find a beer or food or a bathroom or whatever you need to do, there's plenty of space to walk. And I don't know what they were exactly thinking when they designed the stadium, but just kind of getting to your seats and walking through and trying to get food is just a nightmare. And exiting the stadium, it's all crammed together. Everyone's kind of just sardine canned in, and it's really bizarre in that regards. Everything else was a really good game day experience. Obviously you don't have the tailgate of Lambeau Field, and of course everything's in purple and everything like that, which is terrible. But overall, obviously it's a fan base and a crowd that's very passionate about football. As somebody who's attended games in St. Louis previously, and just kind of some other, atmosphere, just, that wasn't as great, I can certainly at least appreciate it that this was, a football crowd that cared about the game, that cared about the rivalry, and that just makes the game more fun, right? Certainly no Lambeau Field in any way, shape, or form. And of course, that horn and seeing everything in purple, not great, but incredibly entertaining game. I know Green Bay didn't come out on top, but that was a massively entertaining game up until the finish. And, Green Bay didn't start out well at all. I thought Rodgers really struggled in that first half. We'll get to more on that in just a moment. But I thought they played phenomenal in the second half. As I went through, I'm going to get to my offensive grades in just a moment. I thought Minnesota's defense in that first half was really, really stout, really strong. They anticipated everything Green Bay was going to do. Their coverages were so good, and I thought they communicated really well in the back end as well. They were not going to let Devontae Adams beat them in the first half. And I thought just, Minnesota came out with a great plan. I thought Green Bay came out with a great plan in the second half to kind of counter everything Minnesota was doing. And it really took Green Bay starting to take some of those checkdowns and having some success with those to kind of open things up a little bit. I thought Green Bay struggled to get the run going, and that certainly made things more difficult. But man, as much as Aaron Rodgers struggled in that first half, he was phenomenal in the second half. Some of the plays that he made, some of the throws that he made, a lot of standouts in this game, which we'll get to in a moment. But again, disappointing loss, and certainly we'll get into that as the week goes on and I get into my grades and all those sort of things. But really entertaining game, and was certainly still a fun game to be at. Of course, the big, rain cloud over everything is continuously the injuries. Elgton Jenkins now out for the year, confirmed torn ACL. Just brutal, right? Like, it's actually crazy. You can blame me if you want for this, but as it got into the fourth quarter, and this was a really great game and a close game in Green Bay, I think at the time, was still trailing, if I remember, but either way, we were in the fourth quarter. I was literally thinking to myself in the stands, man, Green Bay may not win this game, but we've made it to the fourth quarter, and at least Green Bay hasn't had an injury for once. And of course, then all of a sudden Elgton goes down a few plays later, and it's so devastating because, teams will get snake bit like this. And I give Green Bay a ton of credit for fighting through in this game and playing the way that they did, especially in the second half with all the injuries that they have, and then losing Elgton. They fought until the very end. There's no moral victories, and you don't take away things like that, and every team's beat up to some extent. But I mean, my goodness, from left to right, Bakhtiari, Jenkins, Josh Myers, all out on the offensive line, Tunyon at tight end, Aaron Jones at running, but all the names. I don't even need to go through them, but Z and Gary at edge rusher, Whitney Merciless at edge rusher, Jair at corner. I mean, how much did Green Bay miss Jair Alexander in this game? I mean, they've done so well making do without him for the most part. They could have used him so much again in this game against Jefferson and Thielen. You could kind of, again, you can see at times just the Band-Aids and Scotch tape that Green Bay is piecing together to try to keep this team together and winning football games. At some point, there's just a breaking point, and I don't think this week was that. I thought they played really good football, especially on the offensive side of the ball in the second half. But you just see some of the issues. Even Rodgers with his toe in the first half, I think it played an issue. So this team's very beat up, and seeing Jenkins go down with a torn ACL. And I think the thing is, we're watching with David Bakhtiari right now. We're coming up at about a year to the point where he was injured a little bit before that. This is an 11 to 12 month injury, right? So October, November for Elgton Jenkins next year is probably what you're looking at, which is just a whole nother devastating effect of that. You're not even through this season and all the injuries, and you're already talking about guys like Kylan Hill and Elgton Jenkins, missing the start of next season. It's really, really tough to kind of think about some of that. And, as great as the offensive line was a season ago, again, to lose Lindsley in free agency, now Elgton Jenkins out for the year, Bakhtiari's, this will literally be a season where Jenkins and Bakhtiari never played in the same game. So that trio last year of Corey Lindsley, Elgton Jenkins, and David Bakhtiari, never did you have two of them in any game this season. Of course, Lindsley leaving in free agency, but you get my point. That was such a huge strength of this offense, and to never have more than one of them in a game at any given moment, and now probably entering a stretch where you're going to be without Jenkins and Bakhtiari for at least some period of time. This is going to be difficult, and especially as you go against Aaron Donald and Von Miller in this Rams front, it's going to be very, very difficult. But we'll get into all of that as the week goes on, but certainly devastating to see Elgton Jenkins go down with it, and then confirmed by Matt LaFleur, amongst others, that he's going to be out for the season, and did in fact tear his ACL. That was confirmed again on Monday. Speaking of David Bakhtiari, Matt LaFleur also stated that he will not play this week. So no return set yet. It seems that they remain optimistic that he will play this season. It sounds like December at some point, maybe after that bye week, but you need to get him back practicing right, and you hope there wasn't a setback, and there's just been this other cloud of, over David Bakhtiari, and we're still certainly within the realm of like a normal recovery time, right? But Green Bay obviously really needs David Bakhtiari back now with Elgton Jenkins out, and Yash played really well in this past game. It was only 10 snaps, but I thought he played well, and we'll see if he can continue that. But this is definitely something that this offensive line is going to have to be massively monitored. And again, especially against the Rams coming up this upcoming week. So again, all things that we will get into, but the big news, again, Jenkins officially torn ACL. Bakhtiari will not be playing this week. One other small piece of news, Will Redmond was released. Usually this is just procedural, right? So at this point, if you had a player that you put on IR prior to the start of the season, remember you cannot bring them back. Will Redmond was placed on IR before the season started, so before he was on the initial 53, which means they cannot return him from the IR list to play this season, which means that when he becomes healthy, you're basically forced to release him because, of course, the player wants to play, and you can't just hold him against his will on IR. So you release him. It's more of a procedural move, and that would allow him, if he is healthy at this point, to sign with another team. We'll see if that happens or not, but that could theoretically happen. If he's healthy and Green Bay releases him, he could sign with another team. So that's usually just procedural at that point, but Will Redmond no longer a member of the Green Bay Packers. Let's get into the grades for this week. Had the opportunity to break down the offensive side of the ball. We'll get to defense later in the week, but I usually go through my top three. I'm going to go through my top five. PFF and I agreed actually on all top five players. We had them slightly in different orders this week, but we all had, both them and I had the top five were the exact same this week. And my order of it was Aaron Rodgers, number one. Really rough first half. He had the pick almost on the play where it was the rollout to the right, and then he threw to Devontae. He was late to Devontae over the middle, and then probably should have been picked. And then, of course, trying to buy time and had the fumble where he, kind of hit it up against Elgton Jenkins, and the ball came out. Probably should have been a lost fumble. There's some plays he just missed, some throws he just missed, but a really rough start to that first half. And then again, in the second half, not only did he make up for the first half, but well made up for it. The play to DeGuara, the throw to Devontae. I mean, is just ridiculous, right? He's trying to call the timeout, and then there's immediate pressure on him, and he gets crushed, and he still has the arm strength to get it to Adams, who was obviously wide open on the play, but that was a really great play. And then, of course, hitting MVS in stride for the touchdown to tie the game on the last offensive play of the game. I would love to know if Rodgers has ever thrown back, touchdowns on back-to-back offensive plays before, because he did it, of course, to Adams in the end zone, and then the next play was the touchdown to MVS offensively. So also the very last two offensive plays of the game were both touchdowns. Usually not going to end in a loss if your last two plays were touchdowns. Unfortunately, this one did, but I thought he more than made up for some of the struggles in the first half with just a phenomenal second half. Devontae Adams was second on my list. Obviously, the two touchdowns were a huge piece of that. MVS was third, again, for obvious reasons. There were a couple plays you could tell, he and Rodgers just weren't on the same page, but there were a couple other opportunities where Rodgers had MVS open and could have hit him. And just a lot of times it was offensive line. It wasn't anything to do with Rodgers, but just didn't have the time. But MVS had a really, really nice game. And another player who had a great game in this one, all of these were +1 or above in this game, which is a really good grade. It was Equanimeous St. Brown. I mean, just a phenomenal game from EQ. Also had a couple opportunities where if Rodgers would have seen him or had more time in the pocket, he came open. Of course, had the couple big plays in this game as well, but he also blocked really well. I mean, I thought he looked Alan Lazard-esque as a blocker, and then, looked, I thought, more, explosive is maybe the wrong word, but more explosive. He looked more explosive than Lazard did as a receiver as well. This was a really strong game from EQ. I'm interested to see, maybe they may, move him to the active or what, but I guess he is on the active, right? So disregard that comment, but he seems ready to potentially take a little bit of a step in this offense, but I was really excited about that game from EQ. And then DeGuara was number 5, and I just want to touch base on that for a moment because I've been pretty tough on DeGuara, and he's made some really bad blocks and hasn't gotten open when he needs to kind of come back to the football and has ran some wrong routes. And then to open this game, there's a play early in the game where, the ball is snapped and he's still in his stance for like a good second. And then he's looking to block and there's nobody there to block. So he goes on his route and Rodgers is probably trying to get him to check back and he's just all over the place. But after that, I thought he blocked well. He had a couple devastating chip blocks where he just kind of took out guys. Of course, the touchdown, he had I think a check down that he took for a handful of yardage. So now I thought this was Josiah DeGuara by far his best game. And not only that, but more importantly, he had another play where he led on a block and had a great block. There were signs in this game that, okay, there's something there. And I think that was the real first time that we saw that. And remember, he's also coming back from a major injury, ACL injury a season ago. And these things take time. And I think we're starting to see Josiah, gain a little bit more confidence. And this was the first time where on tape, I'm like, okay, blocking, catching, a little bit of run after the catch, maybe not a lot, but there was enough in this game to say, I can see the idea. I can see the traits. I can see why maybe they wanted to spend, a third-round pick on this type of player. Probably still a little bit rich, but you get the point. This was, I don't want to call it a breakout performance, but this is what you hope jump starts a Josiah DeGuara run where maybe he gains some confidence and shows what he's capable of doing. This is the first real time I think we saw that from Josiah in his very young career up until this point. Bottom 3, there was really only a bottom 2. The third one was pretty much a neutral grade. But Billy Turner was by far and away the lowest grade. PFF and I actually agreed on that as well. We both had Turner as our lowest player for the Packers this week. I thought he really struggled. The hands in the face was whatever. I wasn't really going to knock him on that, but just technique all over the place. Got pushed back into Rodgers on multiple occasions. Just a really rough game from Billy. And then Royce Newman was my second lowest. Had the false start. Had a couple other blocks where he got pushed back. A couple plays were on a kind of stunts. Probably could have picked up better. Not a terrible game from Royce, but I still think a game that was a decent negative. And again, that's the right side of your offensive line, right? And then the third was Lucas Patrick, which he had a -0.1, which is nothing. It's, again, basically a neutral grade. but still a slight negative for Lucas. Still too much time where he's getting pushed back into the quarterback. You'd like to see him, be able to get some movement in the running game a little bit more. But not a bad game from Lucas. It certainly did not count that false start against him in any way, shape, or form, where he just bobbed his head. It was ridiculous. But still think he can do a little bit better than what he did this week. Yosh Nijman, if you're interested, I had a plus 0.2 grade on him in 10 snaps. Is really, really good. So I thought he came in and played pretty good football. But if you're looking for a concern moving forward, my 4 lowest graded players on offense so far this season for the Packers, 4 lowest graded offensive players: Royce Newman, Lucas Patrick, Billy Turner, Yosh Nijman. Those are 4 of your 5 offensive linemen starters for the foreseeable future, at least until Bakhtiari comes back. That is a major concern. Now, Yosh has had some moments. Royce has had some moments. Lucas had a really nice season last season. Billy's been up and down and certainly has had games where he's played very well. Individually, any of these guys can play. And I think John Runyon Jr.'s had a really nice season. But together, if John Runyon Jr. and Billy Turner are your 2 best and Lucas and Royce are struggling and you probably have to cover for Yosh a little bit, man, there's some concern there, right? There's no doubt about it. Adam Stenavich has his work cut out from him. No, now you're going against Von Miller and, Aaron Donald and this, Rams defensive line. That's what it's going to be in the playoffs. You're going to see a bunch of really tough defensive fronts. Minnesota, who does not have a great front, had their way a lot of times pushing the pocket. And when Rodgers got time, you saw he was able to, cut up this Vikings defensive backfield. But there were a lot of times, even against, it was basically Everson Griffin and a bunch of guys, right, as pass rushers, they struggled. And that's going to be something to really keep an eye on. And as I know everyone's fearing right now, something that could unfortunately really derail this team if this team can't protect. Now, a ton of faith in Adam Stenavich and Luke Butkus. I know they're going to get these guys ready to play. And again, in the second half, I thought they played pretty well, even with Yosh in there. So there's still hope, but they're going to have to really step up in the absence of, right now, Josh Myers, David Bakhtiari, and of course, Elgton Jenkins. And oh, by the way, getting Bakhtiari and Myers back would go a very long way. All of a sudden, Bakhtiari and, John Runyon Jr., Josh Myers, and then, either Newman or Patrick at right guard with Billy Turner at right tackle, that doesn't look so bad, right? So sooner they can hopefully get a couple of those guys back, obviously, the better. That's going to do it for me today. Great to be back. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll be right back here tomorrow with Rachel Hotmeyer, so make sure to check that out. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.